Good morning, everyone. This is Welcome to Fundamentals with Matt Burk. I am your host, Matt Burk, and today I'm excited to have another guest that I met back in April at the Best Ever Conference in Salt Lake City. Got to speak to a little bit and presented at our Veravest Pitch Slam competition. Bryce Robertson. Bryce, welcome to the show.
G'day, Matt. Good to see you again, brother.
Yeah, likewise. Bryce has a really interesting background and story, and so I'm going to let him tell it rather than me try to convey it to you, and then we'll kind of work our way into what Bryce is doing in the real estate world and front, how he's navigating the current market and what he's got going on. So, Bryce, why don't you give us the listeners a little background on yourself and kind of where you came from and how you got into the real estate business?
Beautiful. Yeah, so born and raised in Australia, in Brisbane. Got to near the end of high school and realized I just wasn't going to take that school route. So I went and I didn't have any business or entrepreneur influences at the time. So I went out and got the highest paying job working with my hands. And I got an apprenticeship as a steel fabricator welder. As soon as I finished that, I went out to Western Australia to work in the underground gold mines, where I worked 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, 8 weeks on, 1 week off. And I did that for a couple of years in Western Australia and Northern Territory, saved up a little chunk of cash. So in my early 20s, I could go and travel the world for 6 years because that was my goal. I did that. Here's how I did it. My first base camp was London, England. I call it base camp because that's where I would work and earn my money. And I would work like 5-7 days a week, maybe 10-12 hours a day, save up a little chunk of cash, go traveling through Europe until my money ran out. Then I would come back and then I would work again, go to Africa. I did the whole UK, Europe, and Africa cycle for 3 years. Then I wanted to change the scenery. So I went from 12 million people in London to 5,000 people in a really small ski village called Fernie in British Columbia, Canada, because I wanted to have a taste of a snowboarding season. But I loved it so much there. And they had some coal mines just down the road. So I started to gig out the coal mines. I stayed there for 2 years. When I wasn't working in the coal mines, I was firefighting, downhill mountain biking, snowboarding, or enjoying the mountainous activities. So I didn't really travel that much during that 2-year period, which enabled me to save up an even bigger chunk of cash so I could go on an 18-month surfing and scuba diving trip down in Central and South America. And that is where I met my wife, who is a native from California. So about 13 years ago, I ended up here in the States, and we wanted to recreate this freedom lifestyle. But number one, without our money running out while we're traveling and living a freedom lifestyle, and with money actually growing and working for us while we're living that freedom lifestyle. So long of the short is I came across mobile home parks, and I put my first mobile home park under contract when I had a negative net worth. I had $2,000 in the bank, and I had unseasoned credit because I hadn't been in the States long enough to build credit. So that was my first taste of raising capital and syndicating a deal.
So how did you go? How did you go from doing all of that to, like, at what point did you decide that real estate was kind of the way in which you would be able to make money while you're, doing some of this other stuff that you like doing? Like, how did that happen?
Pretty early when I came to the States, I looked at the 3 main ways we can make big bucks. And that's owning a business, real estate, and the stock market. I think that cryptocurrencies fits in the stock market category, but it wasn't really a thing 13 years ago. So I knew with my 20-year background in construction and construction management that real estate was going to be the go for me. So then I looked at all of the ways that we can make money in real estate: multifamily, single family, fix and flips, long-term rentals, like notes, the whole kit and caboodle. And mobile home parks kept popping off the page. Massive supply and demand in favor of mobile home park owners, getting to fulfill what I believe is America's #1 need in real estate, and that's the need for affordable housing. Excellent tax benefits, high cash flows, excellent returns, not much competition, and I just went all in.
So what time frame are we in now when you did that first deal that you're talking about, when you had, $2,000 or negative $2,000 net worth? How long ago was that?
I closed on that first deal in 2015.
Okay. So that's not that long ago. So you're talking like eight years or so?
Yeah, 8 years ago. And then once I got that deal across the finish line, I raised the capital for it and did creative financing. Then I was like, dude, if I can do that, nothing's stopping me. So then over the next 2.5 years, I kept rinsing, repeating the syndication model in the mobile home park space, created financial freedom, and then everything's just geometrically expanded from there.
So let's talk about because one of the main thrusts of this show, Bryce, is around capital structure and how people that are raising money from other folks, investors that are doing that they use to do their deals. How have you done that? You've said you syndicated that very first deal.
Yeah.
How did you learn how to do syndications, and kind of how do you structure those?
Honestly, dude, the first deal, I was just figuring out every step as I was going along. It was like, oh no, I got to do diligence. Let's do due diligence. Now I have to raise capital. Now let's focus on that. I was just one step at a time. In the beginning, I really didn't know much about it. So the first deal I did, we actually owned in an LLC, and the investors that I brought on were actually joint venture partners, not limited partners. So they had decision-making power. One of them was an attorney. Everybody was involved in the deal in some capacity. And so it wasn't your typical syndication where you have the general partners who do all the work and the limited partners who don't. So because of that, the way I structured the deal was just giving a certain ownership in the cash flow and equity in the company. And, so our investors wanted to make 12% annual returns. And they were like, if we could make more than 12% annual returns, we would be blown away. 4.3 years later, sold the property, and they made average annual returns of 57.3%. So that was my deal. Yeah, that was my first experience. It was a good deal. That was true. It was also, I gave out way too much to investors in like the way that I structured the deal. And that was my first taste of like, oh, wow, like, maybe there's a different way to structure the deal. But I was very happy to do it. And those guys believed in me in the beginning and made everything else possible in the future.
When you got the deal done and it made it work and you made money and you learned, and that's kind of the progression that people go through. So like so how many deals have you done since then? Would you say, if you know the exact number, or estimate how many deals have you done since then?
Right now, as of now, 25.
25. And are all of these structured then? What has been the progression of the structure of the transactions from that first one that was a JV? Can you describe how you've done it since then?
Yeah, basically we've got two different types of structures now, and it depends on, because we buy anything from 50% occupied up to like 80% occupied. We like the heavy value add stuff. So if something's 80% occupied, we call that stabilized. We'll get an acquisition loan. There'll be no refinance. The way we structured those is typically an 8% preferred return goes to investors, then a 70-30 split of cash flow thereafter in favor of investors until investors reach an annual 14% return, and then on cash flow, and then we would do a 50-50 split thereafter for the rest of the year. Then on the equity, it would be a 70-30 split. And those deals, our minimum underwriting projections, which we've exceeded 100% of the time, has been 8 to 11% cash on cash returns, 19% IRRs. It's a little over 20% on the annual average return. And so that's like kind of the metrics there. Then on the
Go ahead, keep going.
Then on the refinance, it's a little bit different, because what we do is we get it up to about 80 or 100% occupied, then we refinance and we return original capital to investors. The way we structure those deals is 8% preferred return to investors, then 100% of excess cash flow up until the refi goes to investors, which means we're putting our money where our mouth is, and we're going to deliver on our promise of getting to the refi and getting it to like 80 to 100% occupied. Then when we refinance, we project to return original capital to investors, so they have a $0 capital balance. Then they get to stay in the deal after the refinance for the rest of the business cycle, and we split cash flow 50-50 and we split equity 50-50 at the sale event.
So, and have you done anything in a fund format, or have you considered moving into a pooled investment fund, or are you just content to do the one-off syndications?
Yeah, so we are launching a fund right now, which is going to have separate properties in it, but investors are only going to be exposed to the properties that they invested in, not
Mhm.
diversified in other parks. So we just kind of keep it like singular deals, and a lot of them have been portfolios. We're buying portfolios of parks at the moment.
Yeah, that seems to be something I've seen a number of people doing more of these days. And there's a term for it that escapes me at the moment, that people have given that. But essentially, you're creating one PPM and then allowing investors to pick and choose which individual deals they want to get. So they get a kind of a quote unquote fund because they've got exposure to multiple properties, but they pick and choose which properties they want to be in. Is that right?
Yeah, and they're picking and choosing at the time when we launch that particular investment, you know? So they could be involved in every one, but they'd have to reinvest every time we launch a new investment. It's not
Yeah.
like the investors are involved and then 18 months down the track, we're going to add a whole bunch of other stuff that they didn't even know about, and they're going to be exposed to that. That's not how we structure it.
Yeah, and I would say that's not what I have considered historically a fund. It's a newer concept that people have
Yeah.
done. What made you choose to go that route versus a more traditional type of a fund?
I think it's just like good for people to be able to know what they're going to get involved in without any kind of like future uncertainty. Like we got a super tight due diligence process, and we have literally the most conservative underwriting of any mobile home park investor that I know of. So that we like to be really, really conservative and recession resistant. And I think that if an investor was involved in something and then 6 months, 12 months, 18 months from now, the whole scenario could change based off something they know nothing about. I just wouldn't want to be an investor in that position. We're more about like certainty and doing everything that we can possibly do to put investors in the highest probability of being certain.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit more on the deal side. Then how do you say you underwrite conservatively? What is your underwriting criteria, and how do you're strictly in the mobile home park space, as I understand it. Is that right?
Yeah, we own self-storage facilities as part of the mobile home parks. We don't own them independently. It's like we'll buy a 200 space park with 100 self-storage units. So it's mobile home parks and self-storage, but mainly mobile home parks. So I spoke about the metrics before. For the refinance, investors typically make a 50 to 60% IRR on the refinance because the return of capital is happening quicker. And all the other metrics are the same, about 8 to 11% cash on cash return, about a little over 20% average annual return, and an equity multiple of 2.1 or more. That's like the minimum baseline metrics. We've got a 100% track record of exceeding that. But what is the underwriting that we have behind that to come up with those metrics? And this is where I think we're very, very unique in the marketplace. So if we're doing a refinance, we're buying a property right now, and we're doing a refinance anything from 12 to 36 months from now, we are going to add on 200 basis points or 2% to what the current interest rates are to allow for that kind of increase between now and the refinance. Also, with our cap rates, we do the same thing. We add on 200 basis points or 2% to what the current market cap rates are for our estimator of what market cap rates would be when we do the refinance. We also add 300 basis points or 3%, to our exit cap rate for a 5-year exit. That's 60 months from now. That way that we know that cap rates can go up 3% and we're still going to hit all of our numbers. We double our construction timelines to hedge against all of the different complexities and supply chain issues and contractor shortages and city shortages of staffing. And we do that even with our own in-house contractors. We've got our own in-house property management company, in-house asset management company, and in-house construction crews as well. We buy all of our materials in bulk up front so that we can get a bulk discount and so that we've got all the materials to execute on the project. And then we move our construction crews literally go and live in the park so they complete all the remodels and everything like that at a really fast pace. And once they're finished at that property, they move to the next property and so on. We also add on a pretty decent buffer sometimes 50% for our construction costs to add extra wiggle room for budgets to go over, for supply chain issues, for increases in costs. And what we've been doing when we have money left over before the refinance is we'll go and buy a small mobile home park that's in the area. We'll add it to the portfolio, we'll wrap it up, and then add that to the refinance.
Yeah, who are you competing with on those deals? Because I mean, all of that sounds fantastic, right? And we certainly try to do a lot of those same things. I find that when you go conservative on every single assumption across the board, right, that invariably leads to underwriting that is a price at which historically sellers are not super interested in selling. Right, at least in most market segments and multifamily and other, I'll call it, maybe they're more competitive than mobile home parks. I don't know, but and obviously market has changed dramatically in the last 6 to 12 months. So maybe underwriting that way today is easier than it was previously. But how do you get away with that kind of underwriting in a competitive world where there's people out there looking for the same properties that you are?
Yeah, and that's probably the question on like everybody's mind, Matt, that's listening to this right now. And really, it's because we have a unique niche within a unique niche. Like mobile home parks is not really that big of a space by itself. There's not that much competition, but we're buying 50% occupied parks, and there's hardly any competition. Hardly anybody is out there buying 50% occupied mobile home parks because they either don't have the experience to be able to handle the complexities of all of the construction, or they don't have like the capital to do all of that. And so when we're buying these properties, not only is there not much competition, because not many people want to take on such a large project, it's pretty complex for mobile home parks. In addition to that, the properties are only 50% occupied, so the sellers know that they're going to be selling them for not optimal pricing because they had occupancy issues, so they haven't been raising their rents, so they're usually way under market rents. They usually don't have the money to do the repairs, so you kind of get to buy it at a bit of a discount. However, we can also, there's so much wiggle room in these deals for us that we can pay a little bit over what market value would be at those reduced rents. And then as soon as we close, we can like raise the rents to market and we can get caught up like really quickly. Basically,
how big are these deals like on average, and are these in major markets, secondary markets, tertiary markets, and what size are you looking at?
Yeah, I mean, the largest deal is like so far is like 42 million. And
that's a pretty big deal.
Yeah. And that's 6 parks. And that's in 2 different states. That's in Kansas and Michigan. And then we have, the smallest park we've bought has been 12 spaces, because before, like I said, if we do like a refinance and we need to just add on like 10, 20, 30, 40 lots, we'll buy a local park in the area, add it on before we do the refinance.
Yeah, and these are generally in, I assume, tertiary type markets, or you're in major metropolitan areas?
I'd say we're in pretty decent metros. We've got a really strong foothold in the Greenville, Spartanburg area in South Carolina, which is we're pretty stoked with that market. We're in St. Louis, Missouri. We're in the Knoxville MSA. We're in some pretty decent MSAs in Kansas as well. Yeah.
So Midwest, Southeast type stuff, huh?
Yeah, Midwest, Southeast. Yeah, totally.
Yeah. And so are you able then, you've been able to do all this, and how's your traveling and all that going these days? Do some of the other stuff that you like to do?
Yeah, pretty good, man. I actually just came back from a 6-day mountaineering course at Mount Baker, where I was like climbing glaciers, and I stuck my head in a live volcano and like had a lot of fun there. Yeah, I've been able to like travel while I'm doing this. I think I actually live the freedom trinity of financial, time, and location freedom, and that's possible because I've built out teams to be able to manage a lot of this and handle all of this. We've got really good systems. I think a good example of that in play was 2019. My wife and I went to Costa Rica for a 1-week surfing trip. And then we were there for like a couple of days, and we're like, oh, this just like isn't what we're wanting. And then my wife found tickets down to Patagonia in Chile. So we ended up down in South America for 3 months. And then we were in South America for 3 months, and she found tickets over to France. So we ended up doing a 6-month, 20-country world tour spontaneously, launched a book, launched deals I worked somewhere between like 4 to 20 hours a week while I was doing all of that, and still got to, travel all over the world and have a bunch of fun. So yeah, it's because of like team building. There's been times where like we're a little bit understaffed and I'm working like 80 hours a week. And then in an optimal scenario, I'm working somewhere between like, 4 to 20.
Yeah, so I mean, to be able to do all of that, you must have people that you've hired that are working for and with you, right? Is that how you can pull that off, or how
Oh
do you
yeah,
do that?
yeah. We've got an amazing core team. We've got amazing managers. We've got amazing regional managers. We've got amazing construction people. We've got like tons of support and like really really good people.
Yeah, well, it's super interesting background and story, and appreciate you sharing it with us, Bryce. As we get here toward the bottom of the hour, last couple of things. What's one energizing book, audio book, podcast, something you're listening to or reading these days that's got you inspired?
Honestly, right now, dude, I'm reading The Miracle Morning, which is all about just like getting my meditations and affirmations and exercise and all the stuff in before I even begin my day. And that's got me amped, dude. I'm waking up like 2 hours earlier than I normally wake up. And all of the stuff's done before breakfast. And then, everything's pretty smooth sailing for the rest of the day. So that's really good. It's called The Miracle Morning.
Yeah, that's great. That's great, man. So what do you have coming up that you're looking forward to? You got another trip planned to some exotic spot in the world, or what?
Actually, I got a lot of mountaineering expeditions coming up. I'm going to Colorado soon to climb a bunch of the 14ers there, the 14,000-foot peaks. And then in the beginning of next year, I'm going down and climbing probably about 3 or 4 volcanoes down in Ecuador. I'm going to Alaska for a mountaineering trip early next year. To be in like the deep snow and a lot of like kind of crazy weather and everything like that. Yeah, I've just got a handful of like different mountaineering expeditions on the horizon.
Cool. That's cool, man. So how do people get a hold of you if they want to learn more or are interested in any of the stuff that you're doing?
Yeah, come check us out at investcultivate.com. Cultivate is spelt with the number 8, so it's invest, CULTIV, the number 8.com.
All right, Bryce. Hey, good talking to you. Good meeting you at the BEC. And so you got a lot of interesting stuff going on. I appreciate you being on the show.
Beautiful, man. Appreciate our time, Matt. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks, everybody, for being here. Please join us again coming up on the next episode of Fundamentals. We had Bryce Robertson here today. We got more interesting guests coming up soon. So please join us back here, same time, same place. And in the meantime, stay sharp.